The title of this webinar was chosen with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here. I've always been quite fascinated with the language we use in business and all of the terms we throw around without really ever thinking about their true definition. Words like synergy and scalability and robust are part of everyday conversation, but I've always kind of wondered, should I go to the dictionary to really understand what they're about? We have lots of cliches, empowerment and our core competence, and we give 110%. We take it offline, we open the kimono in a sales situation, etc. Well, in my point of view, the word value has been kicked around just like those others. And likewise, its sister term, utility. And I thought it might make an interesting discussion here to talk about the various ways of thinking about value, because it's never really quite defined the way we would want it to be. So my goal here today is first to describe how companies think about value today. And these are simply my observations from having been around the block for a while. Then I want to talk a little bit about how VOC practitioners think a little differently about value, and particularly the problem of how to add value. Third, I'd like to explain why I believe that understanding customer wants and needs, the core of voice of the customer, is really kind of a critical first part of value creation. And then finally, I want to say a little about how you prioritize value creation initiatives. And then at the very end of the webinar, I have a bunch of examples of value creation and finding it in places where you normally wouldn't expect it, kind of unexpected places to find value. Okay, so here goes, starting definitions. I think that most people, when they ask the question, what is value? I think that most people approach it as a financial construct. And let me just say a little bit about utility or value here. If that sort of brownish bar there represents the total amount of utility a customer might get from a given product or service, the way they think about it is really determined by the height of that bar and its relationship relative to cost and price. So if this is what it costs us to produce that amount of utility, then everything above that would be considered, added value or value creation. Now, of course, we have to set a price first. And setting a price is actually an interesting decision, because what we're really doing is we're saying, okay, if there's this much utility, if there's this much total value created, here's how much of it we're going to retain for ourselves, and here's how much we're going to pass along to the customer. Now, presumably, that decision of where to price it is based on some very careful analysis in which we're trying to balance volume versus margin. If we set the price too low, we're getting relatively little margin and passing on most of it to the customer, and we'll presumably sell a large amount of the product or service. But if we set the price too high, volume will be lower, we'll have higher margin. And the idea is to get that price right in the sweet spot, somewhere in the middle there, that balances those things out. Unfortunately, I don't think most pricing decisions are made with quite that much care. But that's really the idea here, is how much do we want to retain for ourselves and how much do we want to pass along to the customer.